fans wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers, co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football as we lead up to the draft. Today's focus is going to be mid to late round prospects, as well as taking a look at the 30 prospect visits that the Seahawks get allocated to be able to have for the team as they lead up to the draft. We've got a current list of the players that they've set those up with, either have had those or will have shortly. I know that there was one, Keith, I wanted to get your take on it as well, that John Schneider mentioned on his Thursday radio show, that they had a private visit set up with a prospect he would not disclose. They brought in their psychological a psychologist as an evaluator, part of that process. The hints that he gave in that show to me indicated that it was Jalen Carter.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, that sounds like, I bet that's Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out if this guy's worth a pick, or is this another Malik McDowell situation?
Yeah, and that goes to the idea that they wouldn't write off this prospect based on everything that you're reading in the news and from pundits out there and draft guys on TV, and what they're going to do their own process and evaluation, which they should. They go through the entire process. He's a high value target in the range that Seattle is going to be, and that hasn't changed. Now the question is, does the behavior change that equation? So it'll be very, very interesting to me. Again, if they pull the trigger on that, obviously they've done their homework. If they don't pull the trigger, that shows again, something completely
that they've
different.
done their homework.
Exactly.
Well, and the thing is that Pete Carroll has mentioned it a couple of times, and he said basically like they ignored their own standards and their own way of doing things with Malik McDowell because of on the field, and they got burned by it. And he's like, it just goes to reinforce that we need to go back to not ignoring those things. And so I since then they've drafted a lot of high character guys. So this is an interesting case because the guy is so dominant. Just so dominant. And the Seahawks are going to be in position to draft him at 5.
I think he's going to be there at 5. Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine, them looking at that and not being really, really interested just because of the player. But they have their own like standards. And the thing is that when you're picking a player like that at 5, it's different than when you're picking a player like that, later. And that's what Malik McDowell was. So it ended up hurting, but it didn't hurt that much because it was a pick much later in the draft. And whereas this one, 5th overall.
I disagree with you in a sense. It didn't necessarily hurt in that calendar year and that draft per se, but I think that after that, they went out and reached a little bit. They didn't correct that issue right away with a player on the team, the roster. It just kind of went unfilled, went into the season. It was still a need at the end of the season that we address the pass rushing situation and defensive line. And they traded back a couple times in that next draft and drafted LJ Collier. And that was a huge mistake. And so I think that was kind of tied together with that Malik McDowell pick. They should have stayed at 22 or wherever they were. They didn't. Montez Sweat was in that conversation. The guy from Notre Dame, I can't remember his name right now, was there, and they dropped back. Both those guys came off the board after the drop back, and they were left with little choice but to draft. Now they could have gone in a different direction and probably made that pick later on, but I thought it created a situation where they just kind of pressed, and it turned out poorly for them. All right,
Agreed.
so that could happen with Jalen Carter. We'll just have to monitor that. I don't know that we'll know until draft day what exactly happens there. Let's get into some of the players, Keith, that the Seahawks have been looking at on these 30 visits they get with prospects. Some interesting names on here. I'll start at the top. Dwan Jones, the tackle out of Ohio State, the big, huge tackle, 6'8", 375 pounds, just a monster of a human being with a little bit of athleticism to go with that. What do you think the idea is here?
I have no idea. I mean, he is a guy with he's just unique. He's so big that maybe you look at that with that 20th pick, or if they move back off 20 and then it's available, just because he's so unique as a player. And then maybe you move a guy like Abraham Lucas inside.
You'd have to.
And that would be weird to me given how good he was for, the first 2/3 of the season. But, they see Lucas and his range and his footwork and his ability to get up to the next level and say, hey, we could play him.
He could be an
center.
all-pro. He could be an all-pro guard or center possibly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so maybe that's the thought of it. But given that they've got two good starters. Looking at another player at the position is that where you're going to have to take him, which is late round 1, is pretty rare.
And this guy's not a left tackle prospect. This guy's strictly a right tackle in the NFL at that size, but would be a dominant pass protector just because it'd take 4.5 seconds to get around him, and a truck guy as far as trucking people on running downs.
You're not beating him with power. You have to beat him with speed. And even then, he's so big and so long. He's going to be hard to get around.
He can just take you outside. I think the only way you could probably beat him is to try to take him outside and undercut, swing around and try to beat him on the inside. But I just think it's curious. He's as big he's as tall as Forsyth, our current tackle, but even an inch taller, but he outweighs him by like 35 pounds. I mean, it's crazy. So that'll be interesting. All right. The next one is Jamie Robinson, the safety out of Florida State. Keith, you had mocked him early in our process. I remember our very first mock that we did. You kind of plugged this guy in. He's an interesting pick at safety. Seems like the team is somewhat loaded at safety, but kind of a hybrid safety would be a need that the Seahawks could fill.
Well, he is a hybrid safety at 5'11", 194, but he plays like an in the box Cam Chancellor style, but he's not that big. Basically, this is a kind of like Jamal Adams, where you've got an undersized guy playing a big guy role, and he can do a lot of, he does a lot of good stuff up near the line of scrimmage, and has decent ball skills and stuff in the back end. So I think he could line up in a lot of different places. He is kind of, a tweener as far as between the two safety positions. Would prefer to play up near the box, but doesn't really have the body for it. And I think that's a lot of the reason why he drops and ends up, probably a day 3 pick early, like a 4th rounder.
Interesting. There's a couple of other prospects on this list that we're going to talk about next that I am not familiar with. And we did a lot of research on the mid to late round prospects for this show that we're going to talk about, and didn't come up for me. So I just kind of find it interesting. Jordan Howden, the defensive back out of Minnesota, and then Jarek Reed, the second, the safety out of New Mexico. I don't know anything really about them. Other than, maybe Jordan Howden is more of a slot type defensive back, and Jarek Reed is more of a box safety. But he's also can play free safety and in the slot. So, more of a hybrid as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this and we've gone through 4 players and 3 of them have been safeties.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting, huh?
yeah. And it goes to show you that they're looking at the position. They know that Diggs is 30 years old and very expensive, and Adams is um, fragile and very, very expensive. And I think they see um, they see the need. They see and they're looking at trying to get younger there, and so they've got. Like I said, we've talked about 4 guys, and 3 of them have been guys that play safety. 2 of them
Yeah.
in the box, and 1 of them on the back end.
Yeah.
So,
And we're going to talk about offensive line, and we're going to talk about a couple edge players. We're going to talk about a linebacker or 2. That's kind of where the focus is. So
which that's where it should be: offensive line, safety, linebacker, and then obviously defensive line. But I'm guessing that that was where they started, and so they've got those guys pretty well.
It's interesting to me, just a general observation as I'm talking about this. We picked 5 overall in the first round and picked 20. We don't have any guys yet on this list that are in that range that we're talking about. Most of these guys that are on this list currently are mid to late round guys. So
well, and that's actually typical, because if you're bringing a guy in for one of these, it's because there's questions that need answered that you're not going to get answered. You don't have any other opportunities to answer these questions, so you're using them, these picks to bring them in. And if they've gone and they've already met with players at the combine or at the Senior Bowl, they don't need to bring them in now. And so the hope is that they've got their homework done on those guys, and they're looking at mid to late round guys here. That's pretty typical for what teams do with these visits.
A couple other guys, Braden Daniels, the offensive lineman out of Utah.
He played left tackle, but he's a guy that's got to move inside.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
yeah, right.
He's a guy that's going to be a guard,
right?
And honestly, I think he'll be a good one.
If you take a look, we've done a lot of research on the draft over the last 4 months, 3-4 months, and a lot of mock drafts. In fact, our next show is going to be a mock draft. The interior offensive line class to me is somewhat weak. It's pretty decent through rounds 2, and then possibly into the 3rd round if somebody drops. But after that, there's not a lot of starter potential prospects. And so if you're taking a look at tackle converts, sometimes those guys have, the size and the athletic ability to play the position if they move inside. Maybe they've got a little shorter arms and whatnot. The measurables just aren't there to play on the outside. So I think it's a good opportunity for Seattle to kind of extend the reach on the interior offensive line, taking a look at those type of players. The other guy that's out there that they're looking at is Jordan McFadden, offensive lineman from Clemson.
That's a perfect example of what you were talking about. I mean, he was a tackle, but at 6'2", and with only 34-inch arms, he does not have the length to play tackle in the NFL. But he is a guy that has great feet, moves well, and is going to be a guard at the next level. But and he'll be a day 3 option. I mean, he's a guy that you can get probably in the 5th round, and then develop into a guard. The Seahawks only have 2 guards on the roster at the moment, and both of them are in the last year of their contract.
Yeah, and another one they're looking at, Anthony Bradford, the guard out of LSU. Same sort of thing. Struggled a little bit as far as protection issues, but a guy that's ready built to be a great run blocker in the NFL. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about a couple edge players that they're looking at. Byron Young, the edge player out of Tennessee. I thought maybe he would go a little later since his length is kind of where he's holding back, but he's got such athletic ability, athletic traits. with a 38-inch vertical and a 40-yard dash in the 4.4 range, 250 pounds. He'd be an option if they don't get Will Anderson, or if Nolan Smith isn't available to them. They're going to be looking to maybe add an edge player later on in the draft, and this guy would be available in the third, fourth round.
I think so, especially since he's going to be 25 before he takes a snap in the NFL, and that's that's an issue. He's definitely an older player, and so I think some people are talking about him as being taken in the 30s, and I think it's going to be down more like the 50s or 60s, just simply because of his age, and there's still like some technique issues that would need to be fixed, and guys that are getting in the mid 20s don't tend to make it in the NFL, and so I think some teams are going to be looking at him and just waiting it out, because there's no reason to take a player that old that early.
Another opportunity to get a younger player that kind of lit up the combine is Yaya Diaby, the edge out of Louisville. Yeah, kind of and he was very intriguing. I mean, at the combine, he's just one of those guys that pop out. You notice when they're going through the agility drills, he's stacked up against other players. Guy that moves very fluid, very quick twitch. Somebody that could play off the edge, drop back into coverage as well. Outside linebacker role for the Seahawks. That would be a very interesting pick. The other name that I thought was interesting that I wonder about scheme fit is Ade. And it's out of Boare, the defensive lineman out of Northwestern. Now he's like, I think he's like
I mocked him to Seattle in our last draft.
Yeah, 285 pounds. He's a big defensive end for the Seahawks, and I'm just wondering about scheme fit. Is he better like in a 4-3 base front defensive end, or
no? I think
is he going to be able
fine. He'd be Shelby Harris. Like that's the role. I mean, he's got a guy with. I mean,
but
he's
faster, quicker, stronger.
Yeah, because he's got a 4.5 40, and so just a lot of speed at 282 pounds. But
and still had a 37.5-inch vertical. So it shows that explosion and the agility.
And I think just you putting him there at the 5 tech. And letting him do his thing. He's a great fit for Seattle, for getting a guy that can get upfield, create penetration, make things difficult for the offense. As one of the 3 down linemen. Now he may not be a great run stopper early, but this is in the NFL today. Getting after the quarterback is more important, and you got to have guys that you can rotate through. So I think that he's definitely in play for Seattle.
The other guy is a middle linebacker option for the Seahawks. As you know, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, Devin Bush are the guys. Jordan Brooks is out with an ACL. Don't know when he's going to come back. Little light at the position, obviously drafting for depth, if not possibly a starter, but one of the guys they're bringing in is Ventrell Miller, linebacker out of Florida. He's often available in the 4th, 5th, 6th round in mock drafts. And that's probably the range that he would start going to. A little undersized at 232 pounds, and a little older of a prospect.
Yeah, he's older, he's undersized, and that he'll drop. He'll be available. Plus, he also just doesn't he lacks a bunch of speed like that you would want. He doesn't have that elite speed. The type of thing that made Bobby Wagner great early in his career.
Bobby Wagner set the bar awfully high. It's hard.
He did. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. If you're looking for speed, I mean,
right.
That's one of the things they liked about Jordan Brooks coming out, was that he's a guy that could that would bring some team speed to that defense. And Miller doesn't do that. And so I think you look at him, and he's going to be a guy that's going to be available probably in the 6th round. And
so here's a guy, let's start talking about the prospects that we've taken a look at as far as getting ready for this show. One of the guys I looked at was DeHalen Henley, the 6'1", 225-pound linebacker, opposite of Ventrell, in that he does have that speed, the agility, but undersized.
But he's
But
undersized.
yeah, so maybe he's better in a 4-3 defense where he's a weak side guy or something like that. To me, maybe that's where he gets drafted by a club that's in that scheme. But if he comes into the Seahawks, he's going to be an off the ball linebacker.
Yeah, he's going to be an off the ball linebacker. He's going to be an interior guy. He's a little he's quite undersized for that, but plays with speed, plays with just great instincts. Doesn't tend to get caught up in traffic in the middle. Does a good job of kind of getting through things so he can get upfield and make a tackle. You just wonder a little bit about durability at the next level, just simply because of he's a small guy for the position. Reminded me at the tape of Lofa Tutupu coming out of college, who was also undersized at the time. Now he put on some weight and got a little bigger in order to hold up in the NFL. Lost a little bit of speed in doing so, but it helped him quite a bit. And so I look at that, and that's kind of who he reminded me of.
All right, so let's talk about a few of the players that you've brought to the table for this conversation, Keith.
Well, I was kind of looking at some late round offensive tackles, guys that I thought could move inside, and I a guy that I mocked to Seattle at one point, I think in the 6th or 7th round, was Ryan Hayes out of Michigan, and is a guy that is not going to stick at tackle if he's ever going to start. I don't think. He just doesn't have the power. But what he does have is versatility, and a guy that could play all 5 positions, or at least 4. Maybe not center, unless they train him there. But has more athleticism than you'd expect. Does a good job of pulling. Sometimes they brought him all the way across the line from tackle, and then had him lead blocking on the other side, like doing things like that. Has that kind of rangy versatility, and like I said, he could back up 4 positions, which is the type of thing that you're looking for with a late round pick, because you need those versatile, scheme diverse players.
Wow. Yeah. No, I agree with you. But he is 6'6". He's probably not going to play center for the Seahawks, but at 198 pounds weighing in at the Senior Bowl, he's probably going to add a little bit of weight if he's going to play interior. But yeah, I don't know too much about him. I do know that he's highly thought of and fairly athletic, as you said. Who else?
Another guy that I looked at was Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. Just I'm getting my notes to load here.
No problem.
He's 6'5", 307. So he's and he's got good arms. So to me, he looks like, okay, this guy actually is someone who could stick at tackle. Decent relative, athleticism, although not great. That's why I think he drops and is down in that same range of 6th round.
Look at those arms. I mean, he's a pterodactyl, man. He's got 85 and 3/4 inch wingspan, and
that's what I was thinking of. Played both tackle spots in college. Does a good job in his kick step and his does a good sliding. He can get outside, hard to get around. But he does get pushed back by bull rushers. And I think he needs to add some functional strength and get a little more active with his hands, rather than just trying to absorb the blow and that kind of stuff. But he's kind of a project, but has the length and athleticism that you like. And honestly, in Seattle, where you've got your 2 starters set and your 2 backups set, having a guy that could come in as a developmental prospect that could replace maybe Stone Forsyth, in a year as the backup swing tackle and potential, a guy that could back up on the left side. I could see that being a something that the Seahawks look at and go, yeah, that's definitely worth the 6th or 7th round pick. And like I said, he's just got that length that you can't coach, right? It just exists.
Yeah. Interesting. One of the players I want to talk to you about is a guy that is a complete mystery to me in this draft. And that's Andre Carter. This 6'6", 256-pound edge player out of Army. And when I first started this process, he was thought of as being a top 5 edge defender in this draft, and then went through the testing process. Well, first he got cleared to be able to play. There was a bill that passed where he didn't have to serve in the Army after school, and he's able to come into the NFL. And then he went through the testing process, and this prospect on film looks like he's a world beater. He's got great agility, speed for days, very long, 81-inch wingspan. And he did the testing. He only did 11 reps on the bench. He'd had poor agility testing in the 3-cone and his 10-yard split and all that kind of stuff. It pointed to a guy that's just not athletic. But conversely, he was on Bruce Feldman's freak list at 13 overall. He said, this guy's a monster. 18 and a half tackles for loss and 15 and a half sacks, 4 forced fumbles in 2021 alone. Talked about his agility, his processing speed, his fluidness, his ability to get bend, etc. And that all shows up, but then it didn't show up in the agility. So I don't know exactly what's going on with this guy, but it seems to me that the Seahawks would be interested in his physical traits if it turned out that maybe he was injured and kind of went through the process or something's going on.
Yeah. I mean, he is definitely intriguing. I don't know. Yeah. Like, was he injured? Was it because, he was training for the Army stuff and not, for the combine? And so therefore it's one of those things, because you got to prep for the combine, and they're very particular in the way you'd run drills and that kind of stuff. And if he wasn't able to do that because he was too busy doing stuff, that would be necessary, doing all the physical stuff for the Army, maybe that would explain it. Looks great on tape. Now, part of it is who he's playing against. Most of the tape that you find on him is against, Navy and Air Force and guys that aren't NFL players. But at the same time, like, he just looked like the real deal. He looked like someone because he dominated those lower tier guys, but did so in a way that looked like, he should dominate because he's an NFL player and they're not. And so I'm just very, very odd. It's just an odd thing. I just expected him to come in and
light it up,
and he absolutely didn't. I think he's a situational pass rusher at this point. He's just a guy that you're going to bring in on 3rd and long and let him get after the quarterback. He's not an every down guy in that he's not going to be able to hold up against the run. I just don't think he's big enough. And
yes, and that's pushing him down. Yeah. So now he's a 3rd or 4th round guy.
I think he might be lower given his testing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. But he's 22 years old. I mean, he's got some time. He just turned 22, so he's got some time. But you don't pick those guys in the first 2 rounds. This guy's going to be 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Sidney Brown, the safety, I thought is interesting at 5'10", 211 pounds. I thought he was one of the most athletic testers at the combine in the safety class. There wasn't a lot of safeties at the combine that were impressive. He was one of them. I would say that in coverage, he had 5 pass breakups and 6 interceptions and a quarterback rating when targeted of 47.8. So he's got a lot of upside there. Rashee Rice is a wide receiver, I think, that's going to be available starting in the 3rd round. And had great athletic testing at 6'1", 204, ran a 4.51 40, which is usually just outside of where Seattle likes to have their wide receivers. They want guys in the 4.4 range. But he had a 1.49 yard split and a 41-inch vertical, which does show short area quickness and burst and so forth. So he could be a slot kind of a guy. Who else? Noah Sewell. So when we started this process, again, here's another guy that's really kind of dropped. Noah Sewell, 6'2", 246 pounds, ran a 4.6, 440. That's one of the reasons why he's dropped a little bit. Just 20 years old, though. Did run a 1.57 split for that size, which is really pretty decent. Middle linebacker option, maybe, for the Seattle Seahawks. Had a great story coming out of Oregon. I'm not exactly sure what's happened since, though.
Yeah, he's a guy that was thought of as maybe the number 2 or 3 off line of scrimmage linebacker, like not a rush linebacker in the draft. He kind of just keeps dropping. I don't know if that's just a case where people expected him, and so he was scouted heavy early by draft media, and so that's what they knew a lot about him. And then now, as they get to know other people, they're placing them above him, or if something else is going on that we're not aware of. But he's a guy that I like, and I actually have mocked him to Seattle a couple times. I think that he would be a great addition in the middle. Part of it also is, if I remember right, he didn't test as well as people expected, which might also be leading to it.
Yes, I agree. JL Skinner, the safety we've talked about on the show a few times, 6'4", 209 as a box safety. Again, 21 years old, got a couple good years of production at Boise State. Smaller school though, but still dominated at that level. So that'd be kind of an enforcer type of a guy that you could bring into the roster. I think the team always needs some of those players, guys that kind of create the the mentality of where you want the team, not only team speed, but guys that really get after it physically. You got a couple more guys?
Well, there's one that I wanted to talk about is Broderick Martin. He's a nose tackle out of Western Kentucky. 6'5", 337. Not a guy that you and I have talked about, I don't think at all, but he is a traditional nose tackle. He is huge. Has a great anchor, so he's really hard to move. And that's about what he does. He's a day 3 guy that will eat space, eat blocks, keep the linebackers clean against the run, and then come off the field against passing downs. I think you can get him in, day 3, probably the 6th round. But definitely like a Brian Monet replacement. And they need more. Well, right now they just don't have anybody at nose tackle except for Monet, and so they're going to need to get a guy. And Monet's never been special or in any way, and so getting someone that can come in and take some playing time from him, maybe push him down the depth chart at some point, is going to be something that they need. And to be able to get a guy like that in like round 6, I think would be a good value for them.
Yeah, Jared Clark, kind of the same role. Guy out of Coastal Carolina we've talked about on the show, 6'4", 334 pounds. Just a space eater guy. That, but he's strong, big bodied, decent motor.
And he's the next guy that I was going to talk about, because I think he's a good 2-gap. If they want to do the 2-gapping thing, he's a guy that they should look at, because he's not going to get upfield. But what he can do is stack a center or a guard and shed the block and make the tackle if the run is next to him. And so if you're looking for a 2-gap guy that you can get late, that there's a good prospect there, right there, because that's what he's going to do. If you want him to do anything else other than that, you're probably looking at a different direction. But there are not a lot of guys that can just naturally 2-gap, and he's definitely one of them.
Yeah, Ika's the other guy. You mentioned him in a mock draft the other week as well. Yep. A guy that's can sink down and just kind of stay steady. Now the 2-gap thing is really interesting to me, Keith, and that will, the way they draft this year will really dictate what they want to do with the scheme, because there were complaints last year that Seattle, in fact, Quentin Jefferson left over this reason. He mentioned it on his kind of exit thing when he signed up with the Jets. He was like, they're going to allow me to be more aggressive this year and get, push forward and get to the quarterback. At Seattle, they were asking him to basically sit and stay at their spots and kind of hold down the fort and not really do that. I don't quite understand exactly what's going on with that mentality as far as not being aggressive and just staying, because you've got players, if they're looking at Jalen Carter, if they're looking at guys like, who's the guy that we've been projected, in the first pick in the second round? I can't remember his name, but interior.
Mozzie Smith.
Mozzie, those guys like to get forward and go. Mozzie's a bigger guy, but he's super athletic. Like number one on Feldman's freak list is being athletic. You're not wanting those guys just to sit and stay. So I'm kind of confused as how this scheme is supposed to work.
Well, and that's the thing, is that they early in the season, they did a lot of two gapping, and the defense was terrible. And then they switched and started attacking more, and the defense went through a stretch where it was really good. And then they slowly went back to two gapping and had some trouble again. And then at the very end of the season, started attacking more. And I think that might have been just a product of personnel, where they were trying to, find ways to make things work when you didn't have the linebacker talent that you needed behind them. But at the same time, you had Shelby Harris and Quentin Jefferson, who are get upfield attack guys. They're not guys that you want, stacking someone and two gapping and that kind of stuff. And also, it's a run defense setup. And if you're calling plays, asking them to do that, and the other team's throwing the ball a lot, it ends up not working. And I would love to see them be more aggressive and do that kind of stuff. I thought it worked last year, and we've seen, on other teams, like, the 49ers during the Harbaugh years were a 3-4 that didn't two gap. They were a one gap attacking 3-4, and it worked really well. And maybe they just didn't feel they had the bodies that could do it. And they're looking for that. But it kind of comes down to, how are they going to use these guys? Because if you're drafting Jalen Carter and then asking him to two gap, I think you're wasting his talents. You want a guy that can get upfield and attack. And he just is that. He is everything about that. And you need to let him do that. You need to let him get up after the quarterback and live in the backfield. And so if they're asking him to two gap, then I'm seriously going to question the defensive coaching staff.
Absolutely. Interesting. One of the guys I want to talk about is the guy you mocked to Seattle in your last mock draft, which was Yasir Abdullah, the linebacker, the 6'1", 237 pounds, runs a 4.47 40, super quick, and with the agility to just affect the team. In 2022, as a fifth-year senior, a little older prospect, but he logged 703 snaps, added 36 tackles, 15 assists, 34 stops. In coverage, he made one pass breakup, 2 interceptions, a quarterback rating when targeted at 46.8, which is elite. As a pass rusher, he had 52 pressures, 29 hurries, 14 hits, 9 sacks. This guy just kind of does it all. And, got him projected currently in the 6th round. It seems to me, with that sort of a profile, now is at Louisville, so it's going to be a little bit of a smaller school. Nonetheless, a guy with that sort of athletic profile and those sort of stats could potentially get him, picked in the 4th round just for that upside.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of people look at him as a 6th or 7th rounder. I think he goes a little earlier for the reasons you said. That athleticism is there, and has potential to be a special player just based on that. I think at some point you have to just let him, do what he does best, and that's attack and I think you'll end up with a good player.
One of the other players I'd mentioned in my mock draft was Gaines, John Gaines, the guard out of UCLA. I think he would be an interesting prospect to look at in the 5th or 6th round for Seattle. If we're still looking at guards at that point in the draft, he's got a really nice athletic profile and has experience playing 3 interior positions, including center. And Seattle could still be in the market for that. So that would be an interesting guy that could just kind of play all the way around. Dorian Thompson Robinson, the quarterback out of UCLA, is another UCLA player that I think Seattle might be interested in if they don't draft a quarterback in the first with the first pick, or Hooker with their first pick in the 2nd round, or even up at 120. They could shock the world and draft him.
God,
but if they're looking for somebody
I
later,
hate that.
I don't know.
That's just not. I don't like that.
Here's for me, I think it's a matter of trusting the process, and if they're all in on Hooker, there's a reason, and he's just very accurate, but he played in a wide open offense. So if they can figure out
25 and will be 26 before he takes an NFL snap.
And that has obviously downsides, right? There's not many 25-year-olds that come into the league at quarterback and succeed. There's no
none.
track record for that. So
there's none. There's a lot of 25-year-olds that come into the NFL at quarterback and fail. Brandon Weeden being one of many notable examples. And it just is. It's not a thing. So I understand that things are going to be a little different in this immediately post-COVID era, but still, I'm concerned.
So if the Seahawks miss out on Charbonnet at running back and miss out on Roschon Johnson, 2 of my favorite prospects at running back in this draft, there's a player at the end, I think, in the 5th, 6th round that I think Seattle would really be interested in. That's Israel Ikanda out of Pittsburgh. 5'10", 216 pounds, so prototypical size that Seattle looks for. 4'4", 140, which is extremely fast at that size. 41-inch vertical, super athletic. Guy is a run between the tackles player, but can also bounce for you. And always falls forward, breaks tackles. He's the kind of player that I think Seattle would be looking for. A guy that turns a minimum gain into a big gain because just of his ability to bounce off, shake loose, and have some bursts to pick up yards.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. That would be an interesting acquisition, and just the ability to pick up yards. That's the thing, is having that ability to bounce off guys, fall forward, get extra, extra yards that way. I think would be a huge plus.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be in the market for a running back in this draft. There's just no question for me. I just don't know exactly when it's going to happen. It could happen early, but we've already got Walker. Don't necessarily need to have somebody early in this draft. If it falls a certain way and that's the best value on the board and they can't get out of it, you might have to make the pick, but we'll see what happens. The last one I'll mention is wide receiver Bryce Ford Wheaton out of West Virginia. I just really like his athletic profile. 6'4", 221 pounds, runs a 4.38 40. So he's going to remind people of DK Metcalf.
Yeah, but he's got no route tree. He's got
right.
He runs one route.
That's what they said about DK Metcalf, right?
True.
So I mean, the opportunity is there. Elite, agility testing and all that kind of stuff. But obviously, he's at the in the 5th, 6th round for a reason. And so you're going to have to allow him to develop over time. But man, those traits, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that height, weight, speed combination is hard to find. And when you got a chance to go get a guy like that, sometimes you just have to pull the trigger. I mean, the Seahawks did with Metcalf, and it certainly paid off.
Do you have anybody else you want to talk to or talk about?
That's actually, we've exhausted my list. So
I've got more guys. Crazy enough. I mean, I literally have enough material here to do like 4 shows. It's
Yeah, and
it's nuts.
that's typical for you. And so I think we should save some of those names for another show.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. All right. So find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk, as you can see right below us, right down there. And follow the show on Twitter at Hawks Playbook. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Check out our YouTube video channel at Seahawks Playbook on YouTube. And also hit the subscribe button. Share it if you like it. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.